I'm Olivia. I was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes on July 12th, 2010 when I was 11 years old.
Hi, I'm Allison, and I was diagnosed on March 10th, 2013, and I was 13 years old. Prior to getting diabetes, I knew Olivia, who had type 1 diabetes, and I just remember her pump and her texting pictures of her food to her parents to try to get the carb count right, and I knew it was really difficult. I was really thirsty all of the time, crazy thirsty. I always had 2 water bottles I'd go through at school, always going to the bathroom. I remember in science lab one day we were testing pHs and I really wanted to drink the cranberry juice we were testing. It was crazy how much I wanted to drink it. I was losing a lot of weight in a really short amount of time. My eyes, when I looked in the mirror, they were like really hollow, and we just knew something wasn't right.
And then when my doctor read my blood sugar and was like, "You're 451, I was like, well, is that good? And then the doctor was like, no, the range is 70 to 150. And I was like, okay, so this is clearly high. And she said that I had type 1 diabetes. And I just had a meltdown. I started crying. I was a mess. My mom started bawling too because my mom and I had both had no clue what it meant. The only time I had heard about it was on Sweet Life of Zach and Cody when Zach was eating a ton of chocolate candy bars and his mom was like, you might get diabetes if you eat all this sugar.
I remember the night before I got diagnosed, I was having a pizza slice and some Gatorade, and I was sitting on the couch just feeling so weak, and that was the last time I would ever eat something without thinking about how many carbs it had in it. At first, it was very difficult to calculate how many carbs and everything, and I have to look it up on Google, but now I can just look at it and get a good estimate. So it's funny, I've seen little pictures on diabetes websites, like what I see when I look at a plate of food is a bunch of different numbers, and what my friends see is just plain food. One of the scariest moments I've had was my first really big low in Hawaii when I had given a lot of insulin for this meal, and it was a slow digesting meal, so I was going down to the beach, I was about to go into the water, and my mom's like, no, you should test your blood sugar, and I tested, and it was 30. My whole family was panicking. My uncle ran to go get some juice. That was just really scary for me because I was so close to passing out.
I think for me, one of the toughest moments was like within the first year of getting diagnosed. It was Easter, and I was so excited because I was like, yes, candy. But then I was like, oh, wait, I can't have any of this. But I was just so excited that my blood sugars dropped from all the adrenaline, and I went to 35. And I had only had like 2 little chocolates, and I hadn't put in any insulin for it. And I remember sitting on like the kitchen stool in my kitchen, like I could see stars. And it was one of the scariest moments of my life because I was like, am I going to make it through this? What's happening?
More of the most difficult times, I would say, are times when people don't really understand what you're going through. For instance, when people don't really understand that maybe the night before you've been up several times with low blood sugars.
Like you're studying all day for a test, all night, and you're feeling great, and then all of a sudden you're 250. And then you're like, oh shoot, everything I've been doing means nothing because it's not going through my brain. And then so you're doing corrections and you're not coming down, and then so I'd be like 250 right before I went to bed, and then you'd have to wake up multiple times during the night, and then all of a sudden you're 30 and you're like, I've eaten so much I don't want to eat anything else, and then you're supposed to take a test the next day.
But something that does bother me is when people say that I'm lucky because I've gotten certain things because of my diabetes. If I had to have an extension on my assignment, if someone's like, you're so lucky you got that, I'm like, take a step in my shoes, and I don't think you'd think that.
When people always tell me that they understand, and they're like, oh, I'm sorry, I totally understand what you're going through. I'm like, you don't. Allison does, but you don't, and no one ever will. And that was for me the toughest part prior to you getting diabetes, and it was like obviously one of the worst things in your life and one of the worst things in my life too, because I didn't want to have one of my best friends go through that. But it was also one of the greatest blessings too, because I feel like we become even closer and you understand everything that I deal with on a daily basis.
Only we and other people with diabetes really understand what it's like, and that's so comforting to have a best friend who does understand.